What if in 2,000 years we said, hey, look, there's a guy here writing about New York City. It's got the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty. Here's where it is. Here's the names of the streets. Therefore, there's a good case to be made that Spider-Man's true, that takes place in New York City. Your thoughts first?
Well, if I will interject my thoughts, if you erase any good history that we could have for this period, and the only thing to survive would have been the comic books or whatever literature surrounding Spider-Man that would exist or persist on into the future. Let's say that we have no knowledge that he was invented, kind of similar to what we have about Jesus. We don't have any direct information about Jesus as a person if he were to have existed. All we have are later things that are written about him. And so most New Testament scholars and textual critics like Bart Ehrman, they end up having to speculate about things and invent sources that suggest that, Jesus did certain things or were from specific places. And so if we had a comparable situation, or we at least applied that to any other character in history that's fictional, I don't know if we would have a good enough criteria to discern a true historical person from any fictional person. So that is the point of bringing up the Spider-Man analogy. And that's the reason why it's a counter to saying that the Bible presents us with accurate historical information, which it doesn't. That's not even, going against mainstream scholarship there. That's the mainstream scholarship, is that the Gospels contain a lot of non-historical information, and I have yet to see good criteria to separate actual historical information from fictional information. So until we can actually do that, it kind of seems like we don't know exactly, what happened, or even if Jesus did exist. Although I think a solid case can be made that Jesus probably didn't exist. That's not really my main focus for this video. I think that I could totally accept that Jesus existed in history and we just simply don't know anything about him. But it would still be comparable to the Spider-Man analogy, because of the fact that we don't have any direct information about the person. All we have are later documents that are written about said person. These later documents are magical and fantastical in their characterization of this person. I don't see a big difference between Spider-Man and Jesus at this point. But let's see what Michael Jones has to say.
Yeah, we know Spider-Man is fiction. If you're going to ask people 40 years after Spider-Man was written, people are going to say, well, this is a work of fiction.
Yeah.
People that were writing about Jesus wrote about him as if he was an historical figure. Every early Christian did, Tacitus did, Pliny, Lucian, Josephus, they all wrote about him as if he was a historical person.
So right off the bat, Michael Jones is not applying a good comparison between the evidence that we have for Jesus and, say, the evidence we have for Spider-Man. If we were to apply the same kind of criteria that we have for Jesus that we would have for Spider-Man, I think it's very likely somebody could have thought that somebody was historically at the core of the Spider-Man story.
Who am I? You sure you want to know? The story of my life is not for the faint of heart. If somebody said it was a happy little tale, if somebody told you I was just your average ordinary guy, not a care in the world, somebody lied.
Because those that were writing later, like the gospel writers and all of the church fathers that he mentioned, they all thought that he was historical because it had been portrayed since 70 AD that he was historical. He was euhemerized into history. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for Michael Jones to inappropriately compare these two situations. It's almost like he's setting it up so that he can compare them and immediately knock down the Spider-Man counter because it's just ridiculous and doesn't match the Jesus story. But that's simply not true. Also, everybody that he mentioned, except for maybe Josephus, they were writing in the 2nd century when Jesus was already established to be a historical figure due to the euhemerization that occurred in the 70s. So it doesn't make sense for him to bring up those people as proof that Jesus was only ever thought of as a historical figure, and never thought of as, a possibly purely celestial figure. I also see this heading in the direction of monolithically painting the Jewish and Christian faiths. I feel like if you're going to have this kind of discussion, it behooves you to point out how diverse Christian beliefs were at this time, but more importantly, how diverse Jewish beliefs also were. So you don't ever have like Judaism or Christianity being like a monolithically believed theology. Like there's no one theology of Judaism or Christianity that was the only version of the religion. And I feel like that's what Michael Jones is getting into here.
So that right there shows you this is a bad analogy to begin with. And second of all, the story of Christianity about a dead and resurrected Messiah does not fit with the Jewish background of what they were expecting when a Messiah was supposed to come. They were expecting a conqueror, someone who's going to defeat Rome.
Well, I would agree that some Jews were expecting that. And that's very obvious. If you look at Josephus, he mentions a bunch of failed messiahs, failed prophets that were supposed to do exactly that. But again, they failed. But still, Jews rallied behind them because there were some Jews that thought that. But to present that as a monolithic idea of Judaism, like as if Judaism was this one idea, and the one idea they had about the Messiah was a military Messiah that was going to come and fuck up the Romans. That's just false. And we know that to be false because there are several different Jewish sects that were going around in the first century, either BCE or CE. You had multiple ones going around claiming different things about the Messiah. If you look at the Nag Hammadi library, you'll see that various different ideas about Jesus were going around at the time. And even once the Gospels were starting to be written, you still had a wide variety of ideas about Jesus. I mean, you had whole infancy Gospels that were written where, Jesus peed on some dirt, made some mud birds, and then killed a kid. You have all these various ideas about the Messiah, but more importantly, saying that they weren't expecting anything other than a military Messiah just shows you're either trying to hide information from your audience or you don't know about the information.
You set me up.
No, I didn't set you up.
You lied to me.
No, I'm trying to help you. Let me help you.
I would tend to lean towards ignorance if Michael Jones hadn't already done a whole lot of research into this area. So, I mean, I know that he knows about other sects of Jews as well as multiple sects of Christians that were going around. So to suggest that a dying and rising Messiah wasn't in the background information of Christianity is